This ESPN podcast is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects. The BS Report. The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. Tuesday here in Southern California. I have a worst 30 NBA contracts column that just went up on Grantland.com on Tuesday afternoon. Check that out if you want to see that. And also we have Zach Lowe coming up a little bit later. But right now, the guru of the best draft in a while, Chad Ford from ESPN.com. How are you?
Good. How are you, Bill?
I'm starting to get in draft mode. All-Star Weekend's done. This is when I throw myself into college basketball. Give me the number one storyline right now.
I think the number one storyline is that we're in middle of February, and there is still a lot of debate about who the number one pick in the draft is and whether really any of these guys are the franchise-type talents that we thought they might be in July.
I've made this point on TV. I'm going to make it again now. In 2007, I watched probably 20 Durant games when he was at Texas because I just thought he was special. And I wanted the Celtics to get him. I liked watching him. I just felt like I was watching the makings of something that was going to be truly great. I don't feel that way about any player that I've watched this year in college, with one exception. There's a slight possibility of Joel Embiid. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, he has the most upside of any player in this draft. When you see the flashes of the way he moves, his footwork offensively, and this has been the guy everybody's been talking about, but it does truly remind you a bit of a young Hakeem Olajuwon. And you look at that and say, there aren't five big men in the NBA that can move like that and have the potential to score like that. Now, he's not doing it in the NBA. He's doing it at Kansas, and that's a big difference. But if he reaches his potential, he could truly, truly be special. And but you're only seeing glimpses of that now. You saw it with Durant every single night for 40 minutes a night. And with Embiid, you're seeing it in 5, 6-minute, 7-minute stretches in certain games for him right now. And, that's a big difference.
When you threw out the Hakeem comparison before the college season started, I got to be honest, I got very upset. I didn't like it. I thought it was you were lapsing into hyperbole, and I thought you were overexcited, and I was going to send you some sedatives. And then I saw him in person in Chicago, and I got it within like 2 minutes because he's one of those guys. I think it's so important to see these guys in person. He's one of those guys that he just looks like he was meant to play basketball. You know what I mean? Just perfect. It reminds me a lot of like Serge Ibaka, where you watch Serge Ibaka and you're like, oh, that guy was meant to do this. And I felt that way about Embiid. Did you see that?
Yeah, it's how he moves. It's how the fluidity in which he moves. There's nothing comes difficult for him. Everything seems natural. And when you know his backstory and understand that this guy actually hasn't been playing basketball that long, it's even more apparent that this guy was made to play basketball. And that's what makes, I think, some of the elite players freaks. When you watch a Kevin Durant play or when you watch a LeBron James play, there's so many things that just come so natural to them that it's special. And Embiid, there are moments when you see that with Embiid. You don't see it all 40 minutes of a game, but you see enough that you think this kid could really do that. And I'll say that in moments you see it with Andrew Wiggins, even fewer, but there are moments when Andrew Wiggins takes over and it's so effortless and it's so smooth. And he can just drop points in a heartbeat that you're like, wow, this kid could be special as well. But with Wiggins, it's even been more inconsistent. And I think given the expectations that we had coming into the season, a little more disappointing that he can't do this every night.
He's definitely a drifter. But then you think, I remember watching T-Mac as a rookie in Toronto, and he had no idea what he was doing. But you could see the raw athleticism, but just no clue. And if you think of it that way, players jump from 19 to 21, especially like the wing athletes. I wonder if everything just came too easy to him and he got too much attention too early. You know what I mean? Like the DNA of some of the guys who have really made it and become great are these guys that had to constantly prove people wrong. And I think the Syracuse point guard is a good example, who's somebody got overlooked heading into the season. Even now he's getting overlooked. I got to say, he's my favorite college player to watch. I was watching that game, Wednesday night. 4 seconds left. They're inbounding it from underneath their own basket. And I'm thinking, this kid's going to make this, or he's going to hit the back rim. Like he's going to get off a good shot. And then he ended up making it. But I can't say I was shocked. Were you shocked?
Not at all. And I got to see him in Maui for 3 straight games. And, coming into those games, the take on him from NBA scouts was, look, this kid is a steady point guard, but he doesn't have NBA athleticism. He doesn't necessarily have elite size. He's just a so-so shooter. Sort of like, remember when certain NBA guys got excited about Kendall Marshall out of North Carolina, this could be one of those guys, makes everybody better, incredibly competitive. But when you watched him play, one, he was a little bit better athlete than you thought. Not a flashy athlete, but he can get where he wants to get on the floor. And two, the poise, not just in distributing the basketball, but understanding when to score and when it's his teammates' turn to score and making those correct decisions every moment. Yeah, I was blown away by him. And I didn't know what it would mean for his NBA stock, and I have to admit that I didn't move him into my top 10 after watching a really strong performance in Maui. And I think he belongs as a top 10 pick in this draft.
And I would add a third thing. Actually, I'd add 2 more things. Takes care of the ball, which in college, point guards, you rarely see that. And I think that really translates nicely to the NBA because you got to take care of the ball if you're a point guard. And then seems to rise to the occasion in the last 2 minutes. Is that fair? Like, it just seems like a gamer.
He's a gamer. And you've heard Jim Boeheim talk about the fact that this kid he can trust as a coach, and that's a big deal as a freshman, more maybe than any point guard he's ever had at Syracuse. That's a big deal, and that's the appeal for NBA teams as well. Not every point guard needs to drop 25 points a night. Not every point guard needs to necessarily have 12, 13 assists a night. Mario Chalmers, for example, is a guy who just does what he's asked to do at Miami and not mess things up. And there are teams right now who would prefer a point guard like that as opposed to a point guard that's trying to go out and get their own every night because of the way their team's constructed. And I think Ennis is a guy that almost immediately most coaches will recognize and be able to trust. And he's going to be a guy who's not only not going to mess things up, he's going to go out there and make all the correct decisions that your point guard needs to make. And that's a big, big deal for NBA coaches. And my guess is his stock goes up another few notches once the coaches start to get involved in the draft process. Right now, most NBA coaches are completely clueless about all these guys. They're way, way too busy preparing for their next game to be focusing on the NBA draft. They're not out scouting at all. But once the season gets over and they get to Chicago and they start reviewing game film with their scouting department and everyone else, this is going to be a guy that coaches are going to be beating their GMs saying, I want him, I want him.
Well, and he's also somebody, especially because Syracuse is one of the major contenders, he's somebody that could use the tournament as a launching pad. And
sure.
I think you could see him go anywhere from 5 to 16. He's probably your number one candidate for the guy who's going to go 5 or 6 spots later than he should. And then 3 years from now, it's going to seem dumb. You know what I mean? Be like, wow, he went 12th in that draft? Oh, my God, what were they thinking? I feel like he's my number one candidate for that. Jabari. Saw Jabari in Chicago. Loved him. I mean, it was a very comfortable place for him to play, obviously, but just seemed so offensively gifted and reminded me like if Rudy Gay and Carmelo had a baby, it would have been Jabari. But more fun to play with than either of those guys. But he's had a really up and down year. Are you concerned about What position he'd be in the pros? Is he too slow? Can he play defense? What's your biggest fear right now?
Defensively is the easiest one to pinpoint with Jabari because he's not a good defender. In fact, you may argue he's awful, and that is going to be a concern. And anybody that knows anything about the NBA can watch Jabari and see that it's a combination of a lack of lateral quickness combined with just not a huge interest in really going out there and defending. And that's the thing. Offensively, he's so gifted, and he can do so many different things. And even when he struggled in the ACC, what it did was push him to go and score the basketball in different ways. He quit relying so much on his three-point jumper, started taking the ball inside, started posting up a little bit. He's going to find a way to score in the NBA. I really believe that. And I think you've started to see him pull out of that in the ACC as he's started to adjust his game. And that's a big thing. And the same thing's going to happen again at the NBA, where they're so much more prepared for you. They're going to take away the number one and number two things you like to do every night. NBA defenses can do that now. And so with Jabari, it's having more than those one or two things in his repertoire, and I think he has them. But on defensive end, that's going to be a problem, and I think it's going to plague him his career, and frankly, why Wiggins and Embiid are ahead of him on the board, because there are NBA basketball is played at both ends of the floor. And if you want to say something in favor of Wiggins right now, is watch what he does to whoever he guards every night. For Kansas, whoever has the hot hand, Wiggins is going to get on him. And when Wiggins gets on him, the hot hand is going to go away. And his length and his athletic ability and his quickness are things that I think will really translate at the next level. And offensively, he needs to be a better three-point shooter, and he needs to be more aggressive, and he does drift a little bit. And there's, all of those things. Maybe he's a little bit too unselfish. But right now, he could hang his hat on being a defender, a Paul George-esque sort of defender that could guard multiple players on the floor. And I think Paul George is the right Andrew Wiggins comp, because it wasn't like Paul George was lighting it up at Fresno State for the first 2 years. I think he averaged 16 points a game as a sophomore at Fresno State and would drift. And now that he's figured it out, we look at him and say, oh my gosh, how did this guy go number 10 in the draft? But kind of hard for a GM to take the number one pick in the draft from a guy from Fresno State that's averaging 16 points a game and had many, many nights where he did almost nothing.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of probably the same NBA people you've talked to, and defense is the one that people keep mentioning, the Wiggins. And I think Paul George, first of all, it's a great comp for him in a lot of different ways, but also kudos to Paul George for, there's only a handful of guys that get into that comp mix. And, now he's in that mix where if this guy becomes Paul George, then he should go no lower than 2. I mean, you could argue that you might even take him over Embiid if you're telling me this guy's going to be the next Paul George, but that's his ceiling.
That's his ceiling, right? And maybe DeMar DeRozan, something like that might be a little bit more look like his floor. Though Wiggins is bigger than DeMar is, and I think that makes a big difference. And
the other thing with Wiggins that I think is really intriguing, and I don't know if he's going to get there or not with it, and this is where if you stayed 2-3 years in college, maybe it develops. But it does seem like he has the makings of a low post game, And I don't know if he just goes into the NBA right now. I don't know if he ever taps into it. I think he just becomes a perimeter guy. But I think if he had stayed in Kansas for 2-3 years, all of a sudden maybe you see them using him in these different spots, and his game starts growing and stuff like that, which is one of the things that sucks about the one and done rule. But what happened to Julius Randle? Why did he tail off?
I'm not sure he's tailed off. I think he's been what we thought he would be. I think the concern for him is his ability to finish against length and the amount of times that he struggled there. And I also think that scouts thought, and this isn't his fault, this is on John Calipari, I think scouts were expecting to see more of the perimeter game like we've seen from Noah Vonleh and some of the other bigs, because he has it. He had it in high school. He showed it there.
He can shoot threes.
Hit a three the other night for Kentucky, but he hasn't really shown that perimeter jumper that I think he's capable of. And so that's allowed defenses to guard him a particular way as well, is because they're not using him to really stretch the floor. And I understand why Calipari's doing it, because he's basically putting him on the floor offensively with three other wings, and he needs someone down there in the paint. But I don't think we've seen all of Randall's game yet.
I thought, for me, that people have been comparing him to Zebo and all this. To me, he's Derek Coleman because of his ability to shoot from the outside. And I just haven't seen him shoot the ball in the game I watched. It seems like he's just always down low, and that's how they use him. But I'd love to see him shoot more. He
can shoot it, but you have been able to see him put the ball on the floor, catch the ball in the high post, and create off the dribble. I mean, this is a really talented kid who might be hurt a little bit because he's in college and is really being asked to play a particular role. But he's going to go top 5. I mean, there's questions between him and Vonleh, because Vonleh's bigger, and Vonleh has the upside thing where I think people already feel like Randall, they know what he is. But my guess is Randall probably goes ahead of Vonleh.
I can't decide when I want to talk about Doug McDermott. Let's just get it over with. Doug McDermott, thoughts?
He'll be at the very least Kyle Korver in the NBA, because he can really, really, really shoot the basketball. And he's a very clever player. And I know some people say, oh, he's Adam Morrison. But, Adam Morrison was not the lights-out shooter that Doug McDermott was. Just wasn't. And whether he develops more than that, I don't know. Defensively, he's got all the issues that you would expect. He doesn't move well laterally. He's a little bit like Jabari, stuck between positions. The biggest difference between him and Jabari Parker is just that Jabari is a better athlete. But other than that, I think their games and their ability to score from anywhere on the floor are very similar.
I would say a very rich man's Kyle Korver. I think Kyle Korver's probably, all due respect to Kyle Korver, I'm a huge fan of his, and I've been a defender for years and years, but I think, isn't that McDermott's worst case scenario? I feel like he could do a little more than that.
That's why he's a lottery pick. And I know Some people look at him and wonder, how can this guy be a lottery pick? What is he going to do? It's why he's a lottery pick. I think if Kyle Korver were in this draft and you knew the career that Kyle Korver was going to have, Kyle Korver would have been a lottery pick in this draft.
You and I say this every year.
I agree with you. I think that's probably his floor.
You and I say this year after year. If you have one elite skill, you're going to have a good NBA career. You only need one. If it's shooting, this is why I'm never giving up on Jimmer. I think Jimmer's going to have a moment in the NBA, I swear, because I just think he's too good of a shooter. At some point, he's going to find the right team, and he's going to be good. You saw it with J.J. Redick. People for years and years didn't think J.J. Redick was going to, have any sort of anything, and now all of a sudden he's one of the best shooting two guards. But that's why I think with McDermott, I just don't see how he'd fall out of the top 12, because you know what you're getting.
And Bill, we say this too: it's the right coach and the right team. If Mike D'Antoni was coaching Jimmer Fredette right now, Mike D'Antoni doesn't care about defense, and Mike D'Antoni will give the green light. I mean, he's turned Kendall Marshall into somebody who you can get excited about. Jimmer would go nuts. If Jimmer was on the Lakers right now, he might be their leading scorer.
Is it fair to say, of anybody in this last month heading into the tournament, Aaron Gordon is kind of the biggest wild card? Couldn't you see him kind of taking off here?
He can, and his game is unique. He obviously can't shoot the basketball at all, but he does everything else. And he looks super awkward whenever he rises up to take a jump shot, but everything else, he's everywhere. And who he reminds me of, everybody says Blake Griffin, and there's some physical resemblances there, and certainly his dunking ability puts him in line with that, though I think Blake Griffin's a much better shooter than anyone will ever give him credit to, because all we remember is his spectacular dunks. But isn't he Andrei Kirilenko? I mean, this is who he reminds me of.
You went cross-racial and cross-country. I really enjoyed that one. That was you hit the double whammy on that. That was great.
Before Kirilenko started having injuries and he lost some of his athleticism, and obviously that plagued his career. Here was a guy who couldn't shoot the basketball, but did just about everything else, could play both the 3 and the 4, and did so many of the things, so many of the intangibles well, that he was a guy who got a max contract from the Utah Jazz. And I think that so many people appreciate Aaron Gordon that way. And I'll say this also, Aaron Gordon's a great young man, and many, many people hold him in very, very high regard as a person as well, and just think he's the sort of person that you bring onto the team and helps your team become a winner.
We look at Blake as a freshman. I think there's a little Blake in there too, just because of the fearlessness. But Blake is a freshman at Oklahoma, 14.7 points a game, 9.1 rebounds. So Griffin's at 12 and 9 right now, but I do think he's gonna. Brandon Ashley's out for the year, right?
He's out for the year.
Yeah, I think his scoring is gonna bump up a little. And as you said, he has a chance to be a really special, defensive glue guy, kind of all the intangibles guys, the kind of guy you could see out there in the NBA Finals guarding whoever the other best scorer is on the other team. And the fact that he might go 9th or 10th in this draft, I think this is a really deep, an especially deep draft that maybe doesn't have the guy at the top that we'll remember. But it's also one of those drafts that you might get the best player in the draft with the 9th pick or the 11th pick or the 12th pick. How far would this draft have to go before you have no chance of getting the best player?
I think it's probably 9 or 10.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think those top 4 guys, Exum, Parker, Wiggins, Embiid, all of those guys have the chance to be superstars. I don't think that they've proven that yet. And I think we felt like maybe they would. Everybody felt Kevin Durant coming out was going to be an all-star. The question was how good he would be, and I'm not sure everybody predicted he would be the second best player in the NBA, but everybody knew that his floor was all-star, and then where he went from that. I think with these guys, there's more to prove, and Exum especially, who most people haven't even seen.
Yeah.
But the potential's there for all of them, including Jabari, by the way. One of the things that scouts will say about Jabari is they still do not believe he's in the best shape that he could possibly be in, that he still wasn't 100% coming into the season from injuries that he had in high school, and that once he gets on an NBA conditioning regimen and really gets his body to where it needs to be, he might be able to take his game to another level.
I'm on that bandwagon, by the way. He looks doughy to me. He looks 15 pounds overweight and like he's never met the right trainer or anything. And those are the kind of guys, that's how he should look. He's 18 years old. You shouldn't have an NBA body yet. But I could see him being nice and sleek and muscular and just having a totally – and then if that happens athletically, he'll be at a different level too. Is Exum – who would you compare him to? Because I haven't seen him. Obviously, I haven't seen him in person. But if there was an NBA player right now or from the past, who would you compare him to?
He's tough. I want to say a better version of Jamal Crawford.
A taller, more physical Jamal Crawford?
He's about the same size. I think he's got a better head on his shoulders than Jamal does. I think he's more of a point guard. Jamal came out and started his career as a point guard before everybody figured out what he really was, which was a sixth man who could just light it up coming off the bench. He's probably the best prospect in the draft of being able to create his own shot off the dribble and get to the basket and finish. And he also does a really nice job as he gets penetration into the lane of finding other guys. And that's going to be his game, and that's a very highly coveted skill in the NBA. There aren't a lot of guys who can really just take the ball and get wherever they need to get on the floor. And Exum has that combination of quickness, explosiveness, length, and determination to get there. He's not a great shooter. He's going to have to improve that. He's not the purest point guard that you'll see. He looks for his own more than he looks for his teammates at times, but it's all there. The package is there. And for teams that really covet a guy that you put the ball in their hands at the end of the game and they go out and get you a bucket, Exum has just a ton of potential.
Gary Harris, Rodney Hood, or James Young? Which guy, if you had to bet on one guy to make a leap over these next 6 weeks, who would you bet on?
I'm a big Gary Harris guy. And,
me too.
And he's been up and down this year, and I'm not sure what's happened with his jump shot. He shot the lights out as a freshman and has struggled with that this year. I love him because he's a two-way player. I love him because he makes an impact on both ends of the floor. And I love him because he can score in multiple ways. Rodney Hood, to me, is going to be a jump shooter in the NBA and a good one. With great size for his position, but that's why you draft Rodney Hood, is because he's a 6'8" two guard who can stroke the basketball a little bit like Reggie Bullock last year. And James Young, I love James Young. I just wish the ball went in more. I mean, For a guy that's a shooter, it doesn't quite go in the basket as much as you'd hope.
Well, I don't want to waste time talking about Marcus Smart because he got beaten to the ground the last few weeks, but if he doesn't start making outside shots soon, I just don't see how he goes in the top 7 or 8. Do you agree?
I think now that Ennis has come on, Marcus Smart's got to be sweating because, Marcus Smart was all about the intangibles, the leadership, the passion, the drive, the clutchness, all of that stuff. Hasn't really shown that this year and hasn't improved his skill set the way that we thought he might coming back. Ennis has shown all of that. And now when you compare those guys, obviously Marcus is bigger. He's more physical. Their games are different. But if you're drafting a guy to say, for culture reasons, and we want this guy to come in and he can really be a leader and a winner, I think Tyler Ennis is now stealing some of that from Marcus Smart. And I think this has nothing to do with Marcus Smart and the fan. I don't know a general manager. I know there was a lot of hyperbole from the media about how this was going to affect this draft stock. DeMarcus Cousins went number 5 in the draft. Do you really think that people are going to be concerned because Marcus Smart, in a super hyper-competitive moment, with a fan yelling that stuff to him that he was yelling to him, is going to fall in the draft because of that? It has nothing to do with that. The teams that are concerned about Smart are concerned because the basketball isn't going in the basket and because he has struggled to lead a pretty talented team to more wins. And I think that those are the question marks for Marcus Smart. No one doubts this young man's character. I think he's a great young man. If you've met him and if you've talked with him, there's just no way that what he showed in that moment is who he typically is.
Well, you said it, though. Tyler Ennis stole his thunder. It's a little like Jennifer Lawrence came in and took all Emma Stone's roles.
Exactly. That's what's happened. And unless Marcus Smart turns it around, and I mean, they're really in danger. Oklahoma State's in danger of not making the tournament.
That's
right
a disaster for him.
That would be an absolute disaster for him. If he can get to the tournament and if he can do all the things that Marcus Smart is capable of doing, because I do think he's a very talented basketball player, he'll be right back in the conversation with everything else. And if he can't, Tyler Ennis may go ahead of him on draft night.
Quickly, what you talked to a lot of people. The trade deadline is Thursday. What NBA trades, if you had to pick one team to make a big deal, who would it be?
I think the Knicks are trying, and I'm not sure that they have the juice to get it done. We've heard about them going after a point guard, Kyle Lowry, Jeff Teague. I know another guy they'd love to get their hands on right now, and that's Jeremy Lin. And the question is, would Houston do it? I know the word is no, but maybe to get out of that contract, maybe if Iman Shumpert and Tim Hardaway Jr. are in the deal, maybe.
Oh God, they would give up. They wouldn't do that, would they? The Knicks? They'd give up both of those guys for Jeremy Lin?
They want a point guard. They want something to shake this up.
Why? They're not going to make the playoffs.
I'm
Cut
telling
the
you,
cord, Knicks.
That's someone that they would like. I'm not saying Houston would do it. I'm just saying that's someone that they would like. And I think it'll be interesting to watch the Warriors. I know they're saying to Harrison Barnes, we're not going to trade you. We're going to be patient. I don't think the owner is as patient as people think. and I think he wants to make the splash now. That's his trade asset. There's a lot of interest still in Harrison Barnes, and if they could get a Greg Monroe or a Thaddeus Young or a Tristan Thompson or a Kenneth Faried or maybe even someone like a John Henson to the Bucks, someone to really help them anchor that front line and give them some shot blocking and some athleticism on the front line, I still don't think it's out of the question that we see a Harrison Barnes deal, because I really think the Warriors are concerned that they're not going to make the playoffs this year, and that's the goal of everybody in that organization.
I agree with you, but I think it's a 2-for-1 if they trade Harrison Barnes. And, for instance, a deal that had David Lee and Harrison Barnes and Kevin Love as the three principals, I think is really intriguing.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you're hearing the same stuff. Just everybody in the league thinks Kevin Love is out of there in 18 months or 16 months, whenever July 2015
is. He is out of there.
And I don't think they can wait until I think it'd be foolish to wait until the summer to trade him, because nobody is trading for 1 year of him when they don't know if he's staying. And to be honest, everybody thinks he's going to the Lakers. People are talking about it like it's a done deal already. And I just think his market's pretty limited. I think Phoenix or Golden State should make a run at him right now, because if you get him now, you pull him into the playoff race, you get him with teammates, then you get a full summer for him to work out with everybody. You have a chance to keep him. Minnesota has no chance to keep him, and they're going nowhere anyway. So, yeah. Till then, we'll talk to you after the trade.
All right, buddy.
Bye-bye. Before we bring in Zach, I wanted to give a shout-out to our friends at Subway, an original sponsor.
Introducing the new Fritos Chicken Enchilada Melt at Subway. With tender pulled chicken, authentic enchilada sauce, and crunchy Fritos chips on top. It's the crunch you don't want to miss. The new Fritos Chicken Enchilada Melt. Get it before it's gone. Subway. Eat fresh.
Zach Lowe, how are you?
A little tired after All-Star Weekend, but hanging in there.
You were my assistant coach. It was we're 1-0. We're 0-1. We had it. We missed 6 free throws down the stretch. What would you have done differently if we could do that game over again?
Well, first of all, during the entire rest of All-Star Weekend, everybody I saw gave me crap about our coaching failure, said that we're on the hot seat, that we've been exposed. Everywhere I went, I couldn't get past it. I don't know. I think we had some internal chemistry issues that maybe the public doesn't want to know about or doesn't know about, but would have liked to have seen more time with Catchings and Delle Donne on the court together. Would have liked to see Michael B. Jordan have a little bit more of a number one option role for the full game. But, look, these are lessons we take going forward.
Yeah, I guess my number one lesson is don't turn the offense over to Kevin Hart. Would be my first takeaway. I have a feeling Michael B. Jordan might be really, really good at basketball, and we never really found out in that game, unfortunately for us. But we were right there. We missed 6 free throws. I like that. The feedback we got about your performance is that you looked like an assistant coach on the bench. Like even the way you were talking to the players and sitting in the chair and interacting, like people really thought, like, who was it? I think Chris Ryan said that it looked like you had absorbed all the games you had watched of assistant coach behavior, and it just somehow manifested itself into your performance. I don't know if you agree.
That could definitely be the case. I think that most assistant coaches are sort of pessimistic, cranky individuals by nature, and I certainly am both of those things. So it's the combination of that and me just absorbing lots of hours of watching assistant coaches look very sad when their players take bad shots or do stupid things. Probably went into that. I was also told I was way too aggressive with the gum chewing, and that I normally actually don't chew gum, but I was a little bit nervous, so I wanted something to sort of, like baseball players chew tobacco and stuff like that. I wanted something to occupy myself. So that's something I had to check. But yeah, Kevin Hart, look, you know what you're getting into with Kevin Hart. And I think there were some chemistry issues on our team. I think there were some other players that were fairly vocal about perhaps wanting the basketball in their hands a little bit more. But look, that's Kevin Hart. That's his game. Is he the Monte Ellis of the celebrity league? I don't know, but it comes with the territory.
Advanced metrics are not his friend. One of the best things about All-Star Weekend is just the scuttlebutt and running into people and hearing stuff. And one of the things we were both hearing was that Rondo is on the table. But yet it's Tuesday, and now we're 2 days away from the deadline, and nothing has happened with Rondo. Do you think he will be traded before the deadline?
I don't. But again, my pessimistic and cranky nature is such that I assume things won't happen. He's definitely out there, and he's been out there for longer than I think has been reported. But I do think it's an awkward situation, right? I mean, next year he becomes an expiring contract, which will make him very hard to trade if Boston wants fair return for him. But right now he's coming off an injury. The Celtics just said a few minutes ago that he's not ready to play back-to-backs. So that sort of puts his value under a little bit of a question mark. It's going to be tough. The Celtics rightfully want a lot. You know, I've heard multiple first-round picks, which is something that Sam Smith reported yesterday. I've heard the same. That's multiple first-round picks plus a quality player is a lot. And it's a tricky situation for Boston. And it may be that we're coming toward, you know, if you look forward a year, maybe we're coming toward a place where, depending on how Rondo plays, the most likely scenario becomes he and the Celtics agreeing to a new contract that is somewhere below the max in terms of years and dollars, and maybe that's an outcome that both sides can swallow and accept.
Our friend Mark Spears in Yahoo wrote about a deal we had heard about over the weekend about the Kings and the Celtics talking, and he said the trade was Isaiah Thomas, Ben McLemore, and a pick for Rondo. He also said that Rondo wasn't interested in re-signing with Sacramento. I don't know if that Rondo ever actually knew about that trade, but I'm sure Sacramento was concerned about possibly re-signing him. That trade actually works in the cap. If you include Derek Williams' expiring contract and made it Isaiah Thomas, Ben McLemore, and either Sacramento's pick or a pick swap. I think a pick swap's a little bit more realistic, and then Derek Williams is expiring. But you look at Rondo, it's the same problem you have with Kevin Love. If you're acquiring these guys with a year and a half before they can become free agents, you got to make sure you can re-sign these guys. And I think when Brooklyn did it with Darren Williams, that was one thing. They had the rich Russian. They were in a big market. And even then, remember, it came down to the wire and he almost signed with Dallas. Don't you think that's 99% of this here is the location of whatever team is going for Rondo? I really doubt that it's going to be Sacramento getting Rondo or or I don't know. So whoever getting Kevin Love, I feel like unless it's the right team, those trades aren't happening. What do you think?
Yeah, and at least in Kevin Love's case, and I think we're going to have to address Minnesota in more detail on Grantland pretty soon. But I think in his case, he at least has the player option for 15, 16. And we've seen with White and Chris Paul that opting in is a way to sort of, where Dwight opted in Orlando, Chris Paul opted in as a condition to his trade to the Clippers. You can use that opt-in as a way to, reassure a team that wants to take a gamble on you that at least they have another year to convince you to stay. Rondo doesn't have that. And although the Kings are trying to think big and make a big splash and upgrade their talent, it's a real issue. And yeah, look, they're only, we can pick them off. There are only 5 or 6 markets that can look at themselves and say, because of where we are and only that, we have an advantage over every other market in the league in our appeal. And you take a guy like Rondo, I don't even know that, if you take one of those markets, whichever one it is, if the team is bad, what we know about Rondo is that dude wants to win above all else. I mean, that's what the Lakers are facing. Los Angeles is great. Everyone in the league assumes Kevin Love is going to find his way to the Lakers somehow, some way, probably as a free agent. But if the Lakers have Kobe Bryant limping around the floor and nothing else in 2 years, I don't think a guy like Rondo is necessarily, or whoever it is going to look at them and say, well, that's a no-brainer. These guys want to win. I think more than anything else, these guys want to win. That's the bottom line. If Minnesota was a 50-win team with a bright future, Kevin Love is staying there, but they're not.
Right. I think, you just go down the league. I think the 2 New York teams, the 2 LA teams, maybe Dallas, maybe Houston, Golden State and Phoenix, maybe. I'm not positive. And I would say that's about it.
In terms of market appeal, like strict market appeal?
Yeah, like big markets crossed with teams that are going to spend money, but then you think about it, like let's say the Lakers offered Minnesota right now Pau Gasol and their number one pick for Kevin Love. So Kevin Love comes off the book, or Pau Gasol comes off the books, and Minnesota now has 2 lottery picks in the deepest draft in a while. They'd have to think about that. But then if I'm the Lakers, I'm just adding Kevin Love and Kobe Bryant, and I have literally nobody else. And where do I go with that? I think it's just going to be really hard to find the right trade. One trade I mentioned to Chad before you came on, I don't think it's any secret Golden State's starting to panic a little and they want to do something. And I think they're a candidate for a 2-for-1. If they offered Minnesota something that had David Lee and Harrison Barnes in it, and maybe some future picks and a couple pick swap things or whatever for Kevin Love, that's a trade that might work because Minnesota's locking in David Lee for 3 years. They get Barnes. For Golden State, you could argue that Love might stay there because that's a big market. That's the foundation of a trade that would work. I'm not sure if that's quite enough for Minnesota. What do you think of that one?
Well, it's not going to be enough for Minnesota. I don't think they're even prepared to consider an offer like that. And by the way, they should be, because the Kevin Love situation it's not just on the clock. It's the clock has been ticking for a while. They're already past the point where Darren Williams was traded contract-wise. So soon it's going to be too late to get good value for him. We may already be there. I don't know. But they're not ready to talk in that sense, and they're certainly not ready to talk about offers that don't involve a really good draft pick coming to them. And Golden State is not only a pretty good team, although closer to the lottery than I think any of us imagined they would be, but they've traded their 14 and 17 picks to Utah, meaning they can't really trade picks now before their 2019 pick anyway. They can trade some swap rights here and there, but they've also traded basically all their second-round picks. So that hurts. But look, I mean, if I were Golden State, I would do that in 0.5 seconds and start doing backflips. But between the lack of good picks to trade and the fact that David Lee's contract is awful, Minnesota, even if they were willing to listen, and I don't really think they're there yet, they're not going to listen to that offer.
All right, let me throw this one at you. Everybody thinks the Celtics are sellers. What if they went the other way? What if they made a hard push after Kevin Love? They got expirings, they got picks. They basically could accommodate any kind of trade that Minnesota would want, and then they could build around Rondo and Kevin Love. Have you heard anything that would suggest that the Celtics would zig the other way and maybe become a buyer?
Well, see, I think the buyer-seller thing is the wrong way to look at it when it comes to Kevin Love, because I think Kevin Love is the single most appealing attainable player target in the NBA right now. And I don't care what stage of franchise you are in, the teams that are acquiring assets, whether it's cap flexibility or draft picks or just trade chips, like if Houston got Rondo, we talked about this over the weekend, they would view him as much of just as a trade chip rather than as a piece that has to necessarily fit long-term with Harden and Howard. Any team gathering that kind of stuff is looking at Kevin Love. And the smart teams recognize how good he is and what he brings to the table. So I don't buy, sell, whatever. The Celtics, if they could get him for what they have, would absolutely do it. I mean, that's why you get picks. That's why you pile up expiring contracts and picks and assets to get Kevin Love. I think they would do it. They've got their own pick, which is going to be very good. They've got some attractive Brooklyn picks. It would really come down to whether Minnesota likes Jeff Green and would view him as a key piece going forward, because the rest of the actual players that Boston has available, unless you include Rondo, and that opens up a whole other can of worms and Rubio and all that, the rest of the players aren't all that good.
Yeah, and I think Phoenix is another option, because Phoenix has the expiring contract, the Emeka Okafor. They have the young big guy with potential, Alex Len, and they have 4 picks. They could put together a Godfather offer pretty easily for Kevin Love that would allow the other thing that we always mention this, but I'm saying it again. You trade Kevin Love right now, you're making your team worse, especially if you're getting expiring contracts and young guys and picks back. And Minnesota's in a situation where they're not going to make the playoffs, and they're in the West and could conceivably go on one of these runs down the stretch where they lose 22 of their last 25 games and lock in a top 5 pick. So I'm not sure they want to do that. It almost seems like they kind of mistakenly think that they have a chance to make a run.
Yeah, I
here.
don't want to spoil my potential Minnesota column too much, but that situation is not good. They're in a very, very bad spot. Everyone looks at their point differential, and we've been doing this all year, and says this is a playoff team. If there are enough games left, the numbers will right themselves, and this is a playoff team. They're toast. They're done. They have to go like 22-7 the rest of the way to make the playoffs,
Right.
Unless the Western Conference just collapses at the bottom. That's how far behind they are. They're a lottery team, and they have a top 5, top 8 NBA player that doesn't want to be there. That probably does not want to be there, unless there is significant progress shown in terms of the team's future. But he's on such a short contract that we're already at a point where it's going to be hard to get value for him. It's not a good situation, and they should be thinking about dealing him. I just, I don't think that they're ready yet. And honestly, it's hard as a GM in a franchise, particularly a small market one that struggles to get those players. It's got to be hard to look in the mirror and say, we got to move them. We got to think about moving. Look at all the gymnastics Orlando did to try and convince Dwight Howard to stay, and nobody really blamed them because it's just hard to get a top 5, top 10 player in a market like that.
Right. And especially when you're trading a superstar for a package, it could go so many ways, and most of them are bad. I had this in the worst contracts column that's going up today. You look at that Chris Paul trade and how it turned out for New Orleans. They ended up with Eric Gordon, Al-Farouq Aminu, 1 year of Chris Kaman, and Austin Rivers. That was their entire package for Chris Paul. What is that, 10 cents on the dollar? That's a catastrophe.
And Eric Gordon is untradeable.
He's untradeable.
And you look at so he's untradeable, and the rest of the guys are non-impactful. And you look at Orlando, I wrote about them today. Everyone agrees, or based this sort of line of thought now, they won the Dwight Howard trade.
Not only did they win,
CEO.
Probably the best haul.
Yeah, and I was talking to Alex Martin, their CEO, and he was saying, look at the Dwight Howard trade. I think Orlando is the only team that has guys from that trade that are still on the team that traded for them, and yet they're looking at their second straight 25 wins or less season with no real, they may win 30 or fewer games next year. It's just, even winning a trade like that, even getting players that, don't end up being overpaid like Eric Gordon or end up being nice draft picks or whatever the case may be, even winning a trade like that, you take just such a big step back for so long that
right.
It's really hard to do.
Phenomenal trade. It's probably the best haul that anyone's gotten for a superstar. I'd have to look that up, but it's got to be in the discussion for the best 3 trades anyone's ever made for when they're giving up a superstar. Usually it goes badly. I got to be honest though. I think Orlando should be a lot better than they are. I actually think they should be kind of ashamed of the season they've had. They have a good team. They have talent. They have good players in their team. They go 8 deep. They made a really good draft pick. I think it's a cop-out to say, oh, yeah, we're rebuilding. I don't know if they're well coached, and I don't like some of the stuff they've done this year, and they've lost a lot of close games. I'm not sold on the lineups they're playing. I think that's a team to me that looks like they're tanking, or they're just poorly coached. It's one of the two. But you look at that roster. Do you think there's any business that they would be 16-38? That's ridiculous. In the East? Come on.
I don't think it's ridiculous. It's talent.
Really?
Talent. Well, they have talent, but Jameer Nelson is in decline, right? Vucevic missed 15 games or so, or whatever it was, with a concussion, and their rebounding falls apart without him. Now, holding him out that long, we don't know when he got approval officially from the league's concussion protocol to go. That may have been a tanking thing. They run so many sets for Glenn Davis to shoot mid-range jumpers that it does feel like they're intentionally punting possessions. But Glenn Davis isn't very good. Glenn Davis is a big name because he plays hard and he played for the Celtics and had all those playoff moments, et cetera. He's not good. He's okay. He just doesn't move the needle. Aaron Aflalo is a nice player, ideally a number 3 option on a good team. He's number 1 option on this team. Harris, Harkless, they haven't developed. There isn't a lot of juice there. Oladipo's a rookie. I don't think 16-38 is ridiculous for them. That said, they're clearly not trying hard to win. They didn't do anything in free agency, and they run an offense that says we're totally satisfied with Big Baby shooting as many 20-footers as he wants.
We disagree. We rarely disagree, but we disagree on that one. I just think like Charlotte is 23-30 and Orlando is 16-38. And I don't really know how Charlotte, I guess if you were going to say what's the difference between those two teams, I would say Al Jefferson, the low post, and the coach. Charlotte has a really good coach, and they've overachieved. You cannot say that Orlando has overachieved. By the way, a lot of good young coaches this year, or new coaches, I should say.
Yeah,
like more than I can remember.
Hornacek, Stevens, Clifford. I mean, everyone knew Clifford would be good. It was just a matter of who gave him a chance.
Budenholzer?
Yeah, he's not. He doesn't even seem young because he's been sitting next to Pop for so long. But we were talking about this in Orlando. That Pop coaching tree is kind of weird with how few of the Pop coaching tree guys actually coach like Pop. But Budenholzer is like Pop on steroids when it comes to offensive 3-point shooting and all that. He's a really good coach.
And also the rejuvenated Dwayne Casey, much maligned. I know I've lobbed some shots his way, but he's got to be. You got to commend them, and they've done a really nice job the last 2 months, and they're sticking to a rotation. Still a little spotty at the end of the game sometimes, but I like the fact that he at least has a rotation and sticks with it. We don't think Kyle Lowry's getting traded, right?
I don't think he will. There are definitely, these reports and rumors of him being on the market and Jeff Teague and the Knicks and all this. That's all real. That's not BS smoke. That's fire. No team that's ever had Kyle Lowry has been excited to have him short term or long term just because of the personality that he is. But
yeah,
I just don't think they're going to get the kind of return that they want. And really, you look at the free agency market, everyone's like, geez, he's going to walk or he's going to get some big offer. They may just get him back at 3 years, $21 million, 3 years, $24 million. The teams that have cap room, most of them have point guards already. And again, Kyle Lowry is not the most popular guy in the league. I don't think that there's going to be, it really only takes one bidder. On the one hand, it only takes one bidder to drive up the price. So maybe I'm wrong. But on the other hand, I don't think there's going to be like this huge market salivating for Kyle Lowry.
I think you're right. And I would add this. There's a couple of good point guards in this draft. And nobody who takes a point guard in the top 10 is also going to sign Kyle Lowry to $30 million or whatever it takes because they're not going to want Kyle Lowry, near that rookie point guard. Especially because Kyle
Orlando,
Lowry's,
as we talked about today, is one of those teams that's going to have cap room and could use a point guard. And, they may take one in the draft. And as I wrote today, they're not a team that, Kyle Lowry, if I could use a curse word, Kyle Lowry's assholeness is a unique brand of assholeness because he's extremely competitive and wants to win so badly. And that's sort of the good side of it. But he's also just a prickly, nasty guy that coaches don't like. And I don't know where that sort of personality falls in Orlando's devotion to just getting all good character guys across the board. But it would surprise me if they chased him.
See, I would trade for him or sign him because I think he's one of those guys that just needs to play 38 to 40 minutes. And when he's not, that's when he becomes prickly and nasty. I think if he's getting the minutes, he's fine. Just, you have to have him out there. He doesn't want to sit on the bench. He doesn't want to back people up. He doesn't want to split time. That's when you have problems. But if you're playing him and you're giving the lion's share of the minutes, I think it's okay.
So he's like a couple of guys we had on our celebrity team then. He's got to play. He wants to be on the floor.
He's like Snoop Dogg.
Yeah,
Snoop wanted to be out there.
That was one of the chemistry issues. Snoop did not I think it's fair to say Snoop did not take it well when we tried to give him a blow in the first quarter.
No, he didn't want any blows. He wanted to play. I actually liked him. I liked his game. Thought it was effective. There was a little JJ Hickson-ish.
He was good. He made a big free throws down the stretch. He likes the Showtime high dribble at half court, which when you're surrounded by like a Skylar Diggins is just, she's going to steal that. He also did not appreciate some of Mike Golick's missed layups. Snoop was on the bench for some of those, and he was pretty vocal about the fact that if he were in the game, he would finish those plays.
Yeah. Indiana, who you don't have a favorite team, but I would say you have can we say you have a sweet spot for Indiana? Is that fair? Slight sweet spot?
In terms of liking to watch them or thinking they're really good or just all around?
Enjoying the experience of watching them, enjoying how they put thought and how they put together their team, and enjoying how hard they play, I would say would be the three traits.
Yeah, I enjoy the Pacers, and I think part of it is like I enjoy the personalities on the team. Like Frank Vogel is just a grunt who worked his way up to being the head coach, and he acts like it. And Roy Hibbert is kind of a nice, quirky, strange dude who worked his way from not being able to do a push-up into superstardom, and he acts like that. And Paul George, for, one of the 10 most telegenic superstar players in the league, like that guy, he'll talk to you for 20 minutes after a game. He's not impatient. He doesn't have people around him, yada, yada, yada. I do enjoy the Pacers.
Yeah, Hibbert and I talked about that when we were doing the podcast last week, just about how it's a team of guys who nobody believed in or are overachievers or people discounted them. It's the whole team has that kind of attitude and that chip on its shoulder, which I think is good. But they have Danny Granger's expiring contract. And as you pointed out in Grantland, they're in a weird situation because they want to re-sign Lance Stevenson. They cannot, the obvious answer would be to flip Granger into a contract that, goes till next year or the year after, but they can't take on any more money because they need the money to pay Lance Stevenson because they're a small market team. Is there any chance that they say screw it and just go over the tax and get somebody that can help them?
It's always possible they go a little bit over the tax if that's what it takes to re-sign Lance Stevenson. There are some expiring contract deals that work for them in very broad theory in terms of flipping Granger. But another problem is they've got this protected pick that they owe Phoenix from the Plumlee-Scola deal. And although it's like a 99.9% certainty they're giving Phoenix, it's 100% certainty they're giving Phoenix the pick this year, that they still can't trade a future first-round pick until that pick actually goes to Phoenix. So for now, they couldn't do something like Granger and a first to Cleveland for Luol Deng or something, like an expiring who can't play for an expiring who can with the pick as the carrot. They can't do that. So given the Stevenson situation and the pick restriction, I've never seen a Granger deal that really works for them, and I still don't think there's going to be one.
What about Dallas?
For Marion and
they have some pieces, right? They got Marion's expiring, although for all the stuff he still does for them at this advanced stage of his career, it would almost hurt them to trade him and whatever they got back unless it was somebody really good. But they had the Brandon Wright contract. They have some smaller expirings, and they could put together a deal for somebody that's making somewhere between $8 and $15 million, I think. But I can't tell if they feel like it would be just good to make the playoffs, or if they're having any real ideas with this team. I don't know.
Yeah, they're 10 games over 500. They're a solid playoff team right now, and we know Cuban wants to be. He's not interested in taking a step back for the sake of taking a step back. And if they lose Marion in a kind of deal like that, Granger, the way he's playing, is a huge downgrade. That's. They may fall out of the playoffs, or they may, the worst case thing, they may not fall out of the playoffs. They may suffer a little bit and still make the playoffs. So, I don't, and Brandon Wright's deal, I think he makes 5 again next year, so that presents Indiana with the same problems. It's going to be
I wasn't even thinking Indiana. I was thinking just anybody. Could they be a player for, the Jeff Green, Thaddeus Young, Spencer Hawes, all of those guys, all of those available dudes, Luol Deng. Earl Clark.
Yeah, no, I agree. They would an upgrade for Dallas in that sense would make some sense, but they're in the same situation as so many of these other teams that would like to be buyers, in that they've already traded a first-round pick. They've got that pick they owe the Thunder that may not convey until like 2020 or so 2018 or something. So they can't even trade a future first-round pick, or if they can, it's not for 6 or up to like the 6 or 7 year limit. It's just it's going to be hard for some of these teams to do anything except sort of like the Memphis, Minnesota shuffling the deck chairs trade that Woj wrote about last night.
What was that one? I missed that one.
Discussion surrounding Prince and Allen to Minnesota for Budinger and Barea.
Oh, no.
Again, shuffling the deck chairs, right? We can debate about who wins or loses that deal. I think Memphis ends up winning that deal, but it ultimately depends on sort of whose knees you think are going to hold up better in the next 3 years, Budinger's or Allen's. But that's the kind of deal, like some of these teams aren't in position to do anything except sort of swap these mid-range contracts that are not super desirable, or in the case of like a Tayshaun Prince, like extremely undesirable.
Is there any chance Omer Ashik is on Portland on Friday?
Sure, there's a chance. I don't think there's a good chance, but there's a chance. In Portland, because of Joel Freeland's injury, they needed another big before that, or another quality bench guy at some position, and now they desperately need one at the big positions. But it's just, Portland's out a pick, and, if they're not willing to give up C.J. McCollum, plus, Robin Lopez, and maybe, but that's not even enough to get it done from Houston's perspective. But if they're trying to sell people on Myers Leonard, forget about it. And if they're not willing to move Wes Matthews, who's a more appealing sort of veteran chip than Robin Lopez, then, double forget about it.
All right. Most important question on the podcast. Oklahoma City. What do they do?
The safe bet with them is always nothing. I mean, other than the Jeff Green deal, their MO has never been to be super aggressive at the trade deadline. They're one of the few buyers that has assets. They have their own pick. They have that Dallas pick. They have, a bunch of smaller contracts, some of which are expiring, like Cephalosha. Collison, I think, may have 1 year left. I'd have to double check that, but it's a small contract either way. And it's just a matter of, the big contract that would get you the meaningful player is Perkins. And, Perkins is awful. Everyone knows Perkins is awful. No one thinks Perkins can play. It's just a matter of, is there a team out there that's willing to take Perkins if there's other assets attached to it and give something quality in return? But my opinion on Oklahoma City has always been they have bullets, right? They've got their picks. I think they will someday pay the luxury tax when they feel like their window is absolutely going to close if they don't.
Hold on, translation, when they feel like Durant's going to leave unless they do it.
Yeah. And I feel like this season, with the best record in the conference, even though Russell Westbrook's been out for so long, I don't feel like they have any urgency to use those assets now. It's just going to be a time when they feel like this is the no-brainer time to use our bullets. And, I don't know. I mean, who do you want? Evan Turner? You want them to give up a low first-round pick for Anthony Morrow or Thaddeus Young, who's got 9.5 in each of the next 2 years? I don't think there's a player there that they think moves the needle for them. And I sure as hell know they don't want to pay Evan Turner the 4-year, $40 million albatross that is inevitably coming for Evan Turner after the summer.
Yeah, by the way, America, Evan Turner is not getting traded. That's all stuff getting leaked by his agent. Nobody wants that. He's a 13-point-something cap hold next year. You're renting him for 2 months. Nobody's giving up a first-round pick for him. But here's a trade that I think
you're confident about that. You are out there on the Evan Turners either not getting traded or
I think it's BS.
They're not getting a first-round pick. You've been adamant about that.
That nobody's giving up a first-round pick for him. It's not happening. 0% chance.
Not even Charlotte, with all those extra first-round picks and a history of what we'll call curious decision-making.
No, not happening. If they do that, that would be MJ's all-time dumbest move because he's bidding against nobody. Nobody's giving up a first-round pick for him. How about this trade, though? Would you put Lamb on the table if you're Oklahoma City?
Yeah, sure. If it's for the right player, absolutely.
How about
I have no big loyalty to Jeremy Lamb.
How about Perkins, Lamb, and Dallas's number one for Aflalo?
It's the kind of trade that is a we're putting all our chips in this basket trade.
Don't they have to do that? They're this close to ending the season.
Perkins, Lamb, and Dallas's first rounder. I think Orlando would think about that very hard, if not just do it.
I genuinely think Oklahoma City would win the title if they made that trade. I think it's over.
I think that's a great trade. I think Aflalo fits perfectly for them. He can play the 2 or the 3. He can play in big and small lineups. You can take some of the Perry Jones minutes, some of the Cephalosha minutes. You cobble together the Aflalo minutes out of lesser players, even some of Derek Fisher's minutes that he plays next to Reggie Jackson. I think it's a great fit. Once you throw that Dallas pick out, it's gone. You're not getting another pick. It took a lot of legwork to get that pick. And from then on, you're on your own. Now they've drafted well, and Aflalo has, I think, 1 year left and then a player option that he may well decline. So it's not like he's around forever. And he makes less than Perkins, so money-wise, it probably works. I think that's a trade that makes a lot of sense.
Might not be quite enough for Orlando, but maybe Oklahoma City throws in one more tiny thing. But I think that's
Orlando's not getting much more than Lamb and a first-round pick for a follow. And I like Aaron. I think he's a very good player. But, and look, Lamb is actually, you've probably heard this too. He's one of the he's like a weirdly divisive figure around the league. Like there are some GMs and assistant GMs who just think he can't play at all. And there are some teams who actually absolutely love him. He's like weirdly, for a guy who hasn't played that much, he's like weirdly divisive.
Well, I think, having to carry Perkins' contract for an extra year, obviously not the most enticing thing in the world if you're Orlando, which makes me think, I wonder if Lamb and a number one pick for the right to give up a Flalo and carry Perkins next season is enough. But I'm with you on Lamb.
Here's my related question on Oklahoma City, though.
Yeah.
If you say you trade Perkins, you and I agree Perkins is not good. The world agrees on this. He has the use, though. Like, he gives your LaMarcus Aldridge's a little bit of trouble in the post still. He can guard Dwight a little bit, although not as much as the pro-Perk crowd might have you believe. But he has a role in some of these potential Western Conference series. If you trade him without getting a big man back, like if your return is just a follow and you don't get Kyle O'Quinn or some big man that can play, are you cool rolling through the playoffs with the three-man big rotation of Serge Ibaka, Nick Collison, and Steven Adams? I mean, keep in mind, Steven Adams and Nick Collison play extended minutes. They foul out. That's not a non-issue. Let's put it that way.
So you're not banking on Hasheem the Dream?
I'm not banking on Hasheem the Dream. I'd like to bank on a lot of Kevin Durant at power forward, but it's not a route that Scott Brooks has ever gone for, massive minutes on a consistent basis. So he did, of course, break it out lately against Miami, and Perry Jones is a wild card in that same way. But that's three traditional big men plus the beat who never plays. And I love Collison, but anytime he plays more than 20 minutes against a good team, he picks up 4 fouls right away. And Steven Adams can't move without fouling someone. It might not be a big thing, but it's a thing.
Don't count out the if they did a trade like that, they would probably be able to get a buyout guy, because there's going to be some good buyout guys this year, I feel like. So maybe that would be part of the puzzle.
Chris Kaman could get bought out.
It's funny though about what you said about Lamb, because I feel like I've said this. I want to come back at my next life as him on this Thunder team, because all he does is stand in the corner and shoot wide open threes. He just looks like he has the greatest life. Kevin Durant's got a 3-guy trap on him. When Westbrook comes back, he's basically going to spend the entire playoffs wide open. And I don't know. That's the one thing he can do in a weird way. I don't know if he's the guy I want deciding my Western Finals future, because it's going to come down to him in the corner with 50 seconds left like it did in that Portland game last week. And when you put that spotlight on him, I don't know if it's going in. But
what's annoying, though? Who's going to be standing in that corner is Derek Fisher. And that it's so annoying that he's going to make that shot. At some point, he's going to make that shot. And everyone, he just never will stop. It's just so annoying. I find it annoying, but it will happen.
You don't think there's some Jason Kidd potential with him? Because we've seen old legs die in the spring.
Maybe. I mean, Kidd had to do a lot more last year than Fisher has had to do this year. And Woodson, like, you look at Jason Kidd's first 2 months last year, that dude was playing like 30 minutes a game. Yep. Even as everyone was saying, this guy can't be playing 30 minutes a game. Fisher hasn't had to do that. But maybe, who knows? And Lamb, I like Lamb. He's shown a little like off the dribble floater kind of stuff lately. He's long. He's got a good stroke. I like him. I trust him in that situation.
I like him too, in the sense that I do feel like there's a little bit of a fearlessness with him. Like, he'll have these random plays where he'll come flying in for offensive rebounds and practically break his neck, every once in a while. Like, it does seem like he's not like a passive player, I don't think. I don't know if he totally knows what he's doing, but I don't think he's afraid. The Fisher thing, though, you mentioned. So he's basically, since Westbrook went out, he's been playing 20 minutes a game. That's a lot of Derek Fisher. He's been playing well too. He's basically 45% from threes in 20 minutes a game, and I don't know if that's, I'd want to count on that in May and June. I just feel like you have him playing 20 minutes a game. You got Perkins playing 17 to 20 minutes a game, and you got Cephalosha playing 30. It's pretty risky. That's a lot of minutes for 3 below average guys. Yeah,
I mean, if you have Westbrook, Durant, Jackson, and Ibaka healthy and ready to play as much as they'll give you, as much as you want them to give in an ideal world, you should be able to limit the scrub minutes, especially since you've got two quality bigs in Collison and Adams coming off the bench, and Lamb, a player that we like. I mean, if everyone's ready to go, the Thunder should be able to sort of optimize their team. Now, we've seen them not do that even when everyone was ready to go, i.e. they didn't realize until 2 years late that Kendrick Perkins should not play against Miami. But, if they have everyone, they should be able to optimize things.
Fair to say that they're going to win the West. They got a 3-game lead over San Antonio, and just now it came out today that Popovich said he has no idea when Tony Parker's coming back.
And by the way, why did Tony Parker play in the All-Star game? What did Goran Dragic do to everyone? Goran Dragic is in New Orleans for the freaking skills competition. He's better than anyone that didn't make the All-Star team, and he had like $1 million bonus if he played in the game, and Tony Parker can't bow out to let the guy play. Now he's out with, quote, various maladies, like he has the bubonic plague. I mean, why did he play the All-Star game?
Plus, Dragic, the West, you could say 17 guys deserve to be there, but he really deserved to be there. I would have had him over Damian Lillard personally. I thought that I didn't agree with that decision to have Lillard.
I did not have Dragic on my initial list, which I wrote maybe 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
In that 3 weeks, Lillard went into a slump. Dragic clearly passed him. He clearly passed Mike Conley, who got injured, and Dragic played his ass off anyway in those intervening 3 weeks. He passed Cousins. He passed a lot. Like, in those 3 weeks, he became a clear all-star. Lillard, it was too late to take him out, obviously, because the coaches voted him in. But Dragic, if there was one guy that has various maladies and can't play in actual NBA games, Dragic should have been in the real game.
Why do we announce the all-star rosters so far ahead of the game? Like, why can't we just do it 5 days before? Because it really did seem like the narrative flipped for a couple of these guys.
Well, and also, a large percentage of NBA players, particularly good ones who are borderline all-stars, like, look at if you were a borderline all-star and you didn't make the team, the NBA will ask you to be in the skills competition or the three-point shootout or whatever event takes place next year. You're going to be in New Orleans. Yeah.
Zach Lowe, it's going to be quite a trade deadline. I actually think stuff's going to happen this year. I think I would say the over-under on interesting trades is 2.5, and I'm taking the over. I don't think Love or Rondo will go, but you never know with this stuff. We will read you on Greatland.com. Check out Zach's Orlando piece today, and we might have a little something later in the week about the trade deadline. Until then, thank you, buddy.
My pleasure.
Target % off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
Gotta say, Golick, great call on grabbing Subway for lunch and getting guacamole on our subs.
Told you this new guac really amps up the flavor.
Yep, something adding up things can be great. Guacamole on your sub, a new co-host to replace you.
What was that?
Oh, no, nothing.
Subway now has deliciously rich new guacamole made from ripe Hass avocados with just a hint of garlic, onion, and jalapeno. Discover how new guacamole turns up the flavor on any of your freshly made favorites. Subway, eat fresh.